Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Weapon Refine analysis for November 2018. Today's candidates are Bartre, Shanna, Florina, and Sabre. I like this batch. I had someone from a previous comment tell me that we've never had more than 3 weapon refines. Totally new characters get weapon refines. So I'm very thankful that Intelligent Systems decided to do 4 characters with weapon refines, and 3 of them are in the 3 and 4 star pool, which is amazing. Also, Saber definitely needed some sort of buff because he had no relevance. Not only was he never on a banner, but he got his own weapon and a really cool weapon refine, which we'll talk about. And it will definitely make him stand out as well as a unit, should you really like Saber. And for this particular weapon refine video, compared to previous ones, I'm going to talk about the unit on a PvE perspective, meaning Abyssals, Infernals, Lunatic, Chain Challenges, whatever you choose to use the character as. That'll be the unmerged version, and then there will be a +10 version, which I will consider the version that we'd use for arenas. The arena versions will be optimized for arena meta and gameplay, which uses dual skills, sweeps, or ploys, whatever makes the unit as supportive as possible. So, today's first candidate, let's get into it, is Bartre. And Bartre's weapon refine, it's a little underwhelming maybe because it doesn't really utilize his stats as much as it could have. It keeps his hammer effect, the effective against armored foes, and it just gives him another Fury effect. And he already has Fury 3 in his base kit, so he's basically an angry dad, just like Eldigan was. However, Bartre's going to utilize this refine better than we might give an initial look at it for, because he's got an incredibly high HP pool, so the chip damage doesn't affect him as much as maybe someone like another kind of frontline tank that might have a lower HP but higher defensive stats. So he's got the high HP pool, he's got the high defense, and the only real thing he's really lacking is res. Now, I've showcased the build, and all builds that I will show will generally be budget for the non-merge version, and the merge versions will be optimized. But I've shown a kind of budget build on the side there with Bartre. There are definitely more builds you can do than this, but I wanted to just give an example of what you could do. So you can run double Fury with Renewal, and Renewal will recuperate that difference, the damage loss you take from chip damage. But one thing that makes Bartre kind of interesting is that he has a super boon on his speed stat. So he goes from 25 to 29, and he's already got a really good HP attack and defense stat. So you can really make him quite flexible in what he can do by using a plus speed Bartre. Now, the reason you don't really want to dump HP is because you can still use it pretty well. If you ever wanted to make him run stuff like Panic Ploy or Infantry Pulse, he's definitely one of the best candidates for it. You don't necessarily have to run like Flashing Blade if you think Heavy Blade would be more consistent for you, depending on your matchups or what you tend to run into. Heavy Blade's pretty good. My experience using Flashing Blade has been that Flashing Blade tends to work more consistently than attack because of inflated stats and like abyssal modes and such, or infernals even, where armors might have really high attack stats but really low speed. It's easier to buff up your speed with drive speeds and rally speeds than it is with attack, because rally attacks are more rare. Drive attack is still only on Groom Marth as a kind of like a budget option. But yeah, this is kind of an example of what you can do. You don't necessarily even have to use Renewal. You could maybe use Desperation, or even Brash Assault. Desperation would be good if you don't really want to use the speed, should you end up with like a minus speed Bartre instead, because the double Fury will really chip him into an HP threshold for him to get there quite quickly and use it. You could even use, maybe in the future, a Brazen Attack Defense, Brazen Attack Speed. The possibilities with Bartre and a double Fury refine, or just Fury in general, lets you play with low threshold skills like that. Vantage works, Ignis, Bonfire, these are all things you can consider. And you don't even have to use like double Fury. You could end up using even Life and Death, because even with Life and Death, you'd end up having a guy with 34 defense, even better speed, even better attack. And the attack definitely does scale off of his already amazing attack stat, should you choose to use something like plus attack and maybe go for some crazy AoE shenanigans instead. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, and I think Bartre definitely just became a lot better, one of the better green users. And of course, for Arena, you have yourself a green dual infantry user. Believe it or not, he is quite good as a green dual infantry user. Now, this particular build is similar to the Raven build I've shown before on Green Dual Infantry, but you don't have to do something like this because he has even more HP than somebody like Raven. So if you have availability, like skill availability, like Panic Ploy or Infantry Pulse, you definitely should take advantage of that. But because of the super boon, of course, merges, you can go for a speed refine. And I mean, you could even use the Fury Refine. It gives you the same stats, but just makes him take more damage and have a little bit less consistency there, with Panic Ploy chipping his own damage, like Fury chipping his own health so that he wouldn't activate Panic Ploy. So I opted for something like this to just make him similar to Raven, but more tankier. And Water Sweep really does help him because of his low res. You can hit into stuff like dragons and not worry about getting killed on the retaliation. So, you know, big hands off to Bartre for being able to pull this off, but definitely should you invest in him for Arena, make sure you take advantage of the fact that he's got that high HP pool and invest in skills like Panic Ploy or Infantry Pulse should you have availability to them. If not, something fairly budget like this, other than the rally speed defense, works just fine. Okay, and next up on our list is Shanna's Refine. So Shanna's Refine is pretty underwhelming, I guess, because it's literally just Minerva's Refine, or Fur, or Carol's Refine. It's your Wodow plus Slaying effect. So you have your cooldown acceleration and plus 10 bonus to your special. So Shanna suffers from the same problems that Minerva does, which is the lack of availability to stuff like Wrath and Flashing Blade, which is a pretty big deal actually, because that's what makes Fur and Carol really good, by being able to use stuff like Wrath and Flashing Blade. And as I mentioned earlier with Bartre, Flashing Blade is easier to use than Heavy Blade, but should you use Shanna, you're really going to want to try to buff up her attack as much as possible to try to get that Heavy Blade consistency, especially for PvE content. She's still going to be unique. Like, I mean, this is going to make her a lot better than she used to be. And it's still going to be really good because if you use Minerva, you know, having special acceleration and special cooldown reduction is good. She has a decent speed stat. She just has good balanced stat line in general. So merges really do go a long way for this character. But even as a base 5-star, she'll do just fine, and that's why you want to just try to buff up her attack as much as possible. And it's not too difficult because she's a flyer, so you can use stuff like Hone Flyers, Goad Flyers, ally support and such, and you can easily hit with an over 60 attack with her using Heavy Blade. And once you get yourself into the more lower HP threshold, you can set up Brazen Attack Res, Desperations, and Icebergs. Now I put Brazen Attack Res as the A slot there, and that's actually, for now, quite a difficult skill to acquire because of it only being on Summer Lind, but because of Mikoto being on the current banner and the most likely candidate for demotion, I expect that we could become a more available skill. Should you not have access to Brazen Attack Res, which most of you probably don't, Brazen Attack Defense from Akariss is a definite suitable replacement, and so is Fury. So make sure you try to use whatever you have available to you. But yeah, Iceberg, Brazen Attack Res with Desperation is going to hit easily over 30 or more damage that way, and that's what really makes her really powerful there. Now, if you choose to use her in the future, where Blue Dual Flyer becomes available, she's not going to be too bad of an option because of her res stat being decent. It does hit just enough in the 40s where it's going to hit most of the cast, other than maybe some high res mages or high res specific units. Those units that tend to have high res on the enemy team generally also have low defense, so it kind of depends what you run into there. But Shanna's Lance Refined for res with a plus res IV makes her a pretty good ploy unit. If you don't have a plus res IV, then a plus speed also works for the same Water Sweep Poison Strike builds we mentioned, or Wind Sweep Poison Strike, of course, is also a good alternative. And if you end up with the plus attack minus HP because you use it for PvE content, she's still probably going to be just fine for sweep builds as well, especially once you use something like a rally or drive speed on the team, which you should have. So not much to say. Shanna's good. You know, flyers, you can also run guidance. You don't necessarily have to run double ploys, so that as a seal option is also there. Next up, we have Florina. So this one's a more interesting refine in my opinion. It's something we haven't had before. So she has basically like close melee, kind of like close defense, but not necessarily against range, but she also has additional stats more than just defense. It's like a mix of close defense. I guess you could just call it a stance skill that hits all your stats, but only affects melee hits. So it's something that's not really in the game, but it's really useful because it gives her stats in an area that she definitely utilized already well, and she was already really good as an enemy phase unit, so this made her even better. She kept her heavy spear, just like Bartre kind of kept his hammer, so if you're already using them to counter armors, that's still intact, and the weapon refine will go a long way for her. So on the left side there for Florina, as you can see, there's a special refined with Iceberg, which is her highest defensive stat, so that scales the best for the special. What I've chosen to give her for skills, though, is not going to be the easiest to acquire because it's close defense, but you don't necessarily have to use close defense. If you have, again, just something to buff up her res stat, it could be... I want to say Fury. Fury could go pretty well, but with Quick Repose, you're going to need something like healing. If you have like an attack res bond, that would go a long way. Even the speed res bond or speed defense bonds, those are all pretty good options. So whatever you have is a way to buff up her skills, her defensive stats that way. I highly recommend it. The seal close defense is already available to us, and yeah, you just use like Quick Riposte and you're going to give yourself some really consistent damage that way. Keep in mind that Florina's stats, especially once merged up, end up hitting really high speed. Especially with how her special refine works. So just with baiting out an enemy, you're already reaching 31 speed, but once you account for merges, 35, maybe a rally, 38, dry speed, 41 and such, you find yourself needing Quick Riposte less and less, and once you feel that she's comfortable enough doubling without relying on Quick Riposte, you could choose to use Guard instead, or even Renewal, should you use something like Furion. So yeah, Florina's became way better with this. It does make her more enemy phase bait reliant, unfortunately. So if you wanted to use Florina more on the player phase, then you'll want to refine something else, which is the speed refine, or even like res refine if you want to utilize ploys. Similar to Shanna, Florina has even more res than Shanna did, so you can still use ploys, you can still use guidance, and instead of trying to run like a sweep build, sweep in the B slot, you can actually run a chill, which is available through Wallheart. So HP 5 again is meant to imply that once blue dual flyer is out, she'll be a good candidate for that as well. I really want to showcase the value of a flyer though, especially somebody like Florina having that sort of flexibility. For, you know, just having ploys as an option, and she should hit like almost everybody. Guidance is an option. She could even run a sweep build, like a water sweep poison strike build, but you'd have to opt for like speed refine plus speed IVs and probably rely on some rally speeds or drive speeds to accomplish that, but she can do most of the things that Shanna could as well. Between Florina and Shanna in PvE content, they have different roles. I think Shanna is definitely going to be better as a player phase unit and Florina better as an enemy phase unit, and that's what makes them different here. Also consider that Florina does have that effective against armored foes effect, so Florina is going to have an easy time killing fridges. And finally, probably the biggest winner from this banner. I'm not going to go too extensively into build options for Saber, because honestly speaking, I don't expect many people to have him, due to him only being on one banner over a year ago, and he's likely to get another one soon on the new power banner. But I'm not going to go over a plus 10 Saber, because there's probably like 3 people in the world that have a plus 10 Saber. Let's talk about the refine itself. So he's got that slaying edge kept from weapon refine, but this weapon skill is again kind of unique. It relies on his special being ready for him to get an additional 3 stats all the time, regardless of which phase it is. And then he can also distant counter. It's a constant distant counter effect as long as you have your special ready. And there's one way to keep your special ready all the time, and that's Miracle. So it's not too difficult. Shield Pulse hits Miracle. If you have an Infantry Pulse on the team, then, or 2, you can get it hit off really easy. Or you can just get him in one combat engagement and he'll have it ready and then have just walking distant counter all over the place. I think it's a very gimmick build and probably not too consistent, but you can probably find a place for it here and there. It's better than what old Saber could do, I'll give you that much. However, if you, and I do want to mention it, if you did go fully invested into Saber, he can do some crazy shenanigans involving special spiral with a real special, like Bonfire, for instance. Bonfire and special spiral, it would always be ready, so that's pretty cool. You don't have to actually give him distant counter in the A slot, so comparing him to other sword infantry units that do use distant counter in the A slot, he doesn't have to. So using attack defense bond with like Bonfire plus special spiral actually gives him very comparable damage output due to the extra stats he gains from the golden dagger. And something like attack defense bond in the A slot gives him so much extra effective attack that he does compete with other sword infantry units in the game. However, due to his exclusivity, I don't recommend pulling for him. I don't recommend even investing that highly into him. He runs old BST, so he doesn't have anything other than this crazy refine going for him. If he ended up being a demote, he would be very competitive though, so maybe that might happen in the future. And if it does, then yeah, go for it. Go for Saber. But your orbs probably shouldn't go here. I just don't think that would be the best case. That's all I'm going to say for Saber. I'm honestly not going to show you a plus 10 Saber. I'm sorry if you were looking forward to that. But he's a cool guy. He's really strong now. But unfortunately, due to being so limited, you're not really going to get much value out of me discussing him any further than this. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video and hopefully this did help you out a little bit, give it a thumbs up. We appreciate that. Always helps out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already for more guides and content for Fire Emblem Heroes, as we always do. Leave a comment below for which of these characters and refine you plan to utilize in the future, and what character maybe are you looking forward to getting a weapon refine in the future. Me, I'm waiting for my Niles refine. Let me know what you're looking forward to. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.